I call to order the regular meeting of the Lakewood City Council of September 9th, 2013. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Murphy?
Here.
Helen? Wickman? Here. Quinn?
Here.
King? Wilson? Here. Barraway?
Here.
Johnson?
Here.
Hall? Here. Coop?
Here.
Royball?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. As always, I want to thank everyone for choosing to take part in your local government by coming out here tonight. We have a number of people in chambers or by watching us at home, either on Channel 8 or on our website. So thank you again. We appreciate your involvement in local government. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silent prayer. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Will the clerk please read item 4 into the record?
Item 4, Resolution 2013-48, reappointing a member to the Lakewood Victim Assistance Compensation Board.
Thank you. I'm ready for a motion from our council president, Cindy Barraway. Here we go.
Mayor Murphy, I move for the adoption of Resolution 2013-48.
A second? Second. That's proving that there's still a role for paper in today's technological world.
Paper just went down.
All right. We have a motion and a second to reappoint Deborah Platten to the Lakewood Victim Assistance Compensation Board, and Deborah is in the audience tonight. Thank you very much for your willingness to serve once again. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, hang on a sec. Please cast your votes. And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Will the clerk please read item 5 into the record?
Item 5, Resolution 2013-49, appointing Scott Richards to the Board of Directors of the Alameda Corridor Business Improvement District.
Okay, I'll just, before I ask for a motion, just a brief moment of explanation on this item and item 7, which is approving the 2014 operating plan and proposed budget for the Alameda Corridor Business Improvement District. This is something that municipalities do by state statute for business improvement districts within their boundaries. So that's why we have these on our agenda tonight. With that, I'm ready for a motion.
Mayor Murphy, I move for the adoption of Resolution 2013-49.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, please cast your votes. And again, it's approved unanimously. Thank you. I'm looking at George Valek, the Executive Director, in the back of the room. Okay, on to public comment. This is the point in the meeting where the public is invited to address the City Council on items that do not appear on the agenda. So there are a number of folks here that wish to comment on some later items, on items 10, 11, and 12. I'd ask you to wait till we open the public hearing on that. So these are items that do not appear on the agenda. All comments should be directed to City Council. As always, I ask that all here in chambers observe the decorum of the chambers and refrain from applause or audible support or discord with the speaker. And we have a 3-minute time limit, so as you come down here, this applies later in the proceedings as well. The light will be green for the first 2.5 minutes, then it'll hit yellow, and that'll tell you have 30 seconds left. And then when it hits red, the 3-minute time limit is up, at which point I would ask you to wrap up your comments. So let's see if we have regular public comment roster. Chris Edwards, I know what you want to talk about. Come on down. A happy event coming up.
Good evening. My name is Chris Edwards, EDWARDS, and my address is 6707 West Floyd Drive, Lakewood, Colorado, 80227. I come to you this evening as the Secretary of the HCA Alliance. I believe you're all familiar with that, but for anyone who's listening or for our audience, HCA standing for Heritage, Culture, and Arts. And we are a volunteer 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our goal is to support the HCA division of the City of Lakewood in securing resources and creating awareness for heritage, culture, and arts in the City of Lakewood. And our funding assists the HCA division. In fact, last February, we were all here, and my fellow board members are also here this evening. Raise your hand, folks. And we were here last February giving you a check, or the HCA division a check for $5,000, which went to support orchestra shells at the Lakewood Cultural Center and several other outreach programs. And we'll be giving you another check for $1,000 in another month, or the HCA division, which will go to support equipment and children's scholarships at Washington Heights Center. Well, how do we raise our money? It's through our annual gala, Lakewood style. Our fundraiser is going to be next week, Thursday, September 19th, from 6 to 8:30 at the Lakewood Cultural Center. I believe that all of you have already received your invitations, but we wanted to make our community aware of this great event as well. Also at this event, we will be honoring Bob Zachman. Many of you know Bob. He founded the Alliance and a fabulous now retired educator, music educator in Jeffco schools as well. His outreach has been great. At this event, we are going to offer wine and food tasting. Mile High Wine and Spirits is providing the wine. Our great food sponsors are 240 Union, Little India, The Rock Pizza, Wasabi, Sushi Bar, Zynga, and Village Roaster. So all kinds of fabulous food and wine at this event. We also are going to have a silent auction, and we even have an item with Mayor Murphy there. I believe it's a round of golf with you, Mayor, on the silent auction. So we hope we have a lot.
Bid it up, everyone.
That's right. We want a lot of people signing up for that. So, and entertainment as well. Great music throughout the evening. So again, it's Thursday, September 19th from 6 to 8:30 at the Lakewood Cultural Center. It's $35, pretty reasonable for all of that, at the door. Or, here's the great deal, it's $25 if you call the box office or go online to lakewood.org/tickets, and you give the coupon code of either Zynga or MH Wine. So that's a $10 discount on that ticket too. So again, we're here to invite you and to all of our community next Thursday, September 19th, a gala, Lakewood style. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. This really is one of the, in just a few short years that this event has been in this format, this really has become one of the great events of the year in Lakewood. It's a lot of fun anyway, with the great food and the wine tasting and the music. As we just heard, it raises money for some great causes, and it's even more profound this year that you're honoring Bob Zachman, one of the legends, not just in the arts and culture, but in the Jefferson County School District, and a great friend of many of ours up here. So I hope as many people come as possibly can. It's a terrific value too. All right, the next name on the list, Jackie Estrada, I'm guessing maybe wanted to talk about the item later on the agenda. So that concludes the roster of folks who indicated a desire to speak by signing up on the roster. Anyone else in council chambers want to speak on non-agenda items? All right, with that, we'll close the public comment. Thank you again, Chris. All right, we move on now to the consent agenda, and the consent agenda has been made to expedite council action. Tonight it just contains one resolution in addition to some approval of meeting minutes. This resolution is an item of a routine nature, and members of the public will have an opportunity in a moment to comment on it. I'm going to skip the instructions about the first reading ordinance since we don't have any. And I'll even skip the next instructions about pulling it from the agenda. I don't think we'll have to do that tonight. So, will the city clerk please read the items on the consent agenda into the record?
The consent agenda consists of items 7 and 8 only. Item 7, Resolution 2013-50, approving the 2014 operating plan and proposed budget for the Alameda Corridor Business Improvement District. And item 8, accepting the minutes of the Advisory Commission for an Inclusive Communities Executive Commission meeting of June 5th and their full commission meeting of July 7th, 2013.
Great. I will now open the public hearing on the resolution. Anyone in chambers wish to speak on it? I know Mr. Valek's voice is not what it always is tonight, so he's not going to comment on his own item on the agenda. All right, with that, I will close public comment, and I'm ready for a motion.
Mayor Murphy, I move for approval of the council minutes, for acceptance of the minutes of boards and commissions, order all ordinances introduced on first reading to be published in the Denver Post with public hearing set for the date included in the ordinance, and for adoption of resolutions, all of which are included in the consent agenda items introduced into the record by the city clerk.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And it passes unanimously. All right, on to sort of a special item in terms of placement tonight. On to item 9. Would the clerk please read that into the record?
Item 9 is our first reading and first public hearing for Ordinance O 2013-21, the proposed 2013 revised 2014 budget.
And our finance director, Mr. Larry Dorr, will do the presentation while he's getting set up. Hope I don't steal the opening lines of his speech, but this is not the first time that we've seen this. This is something council has looked at in detail a couple of times already. And tonight is the first of the 2 charter required public hearings on the ordinance, on the budget. So Larry.
Mayor and Council, good evening. Larry Dorr, City of Lakewood Finance Director and City Treasurer once again. Mayor and Council, it's been just 3 weeks since your last meeting on the city's budget. As you know, your study session includes a real in-depth look at all the details. So my presentation and talk tonight are geared toward those members of the audience and those watching at home who are unfamiliar with the city's budget or haven't been along for the ride throughout the year and particularly during the summer. So there is no new information that's come along since your last meeting. No updates, no change in the statistics, etc. But I'd really like to use this as an opportunity to orient those who might be unfamiliar. And then, of course, myself, the city manager, and all of the department heads are present and available to answer any questions that you might have regarding the city's 2014 budget. As I mentioned, 3 weeks ago, we had a review of the city's budget. This was presented to council exactly a month ago today. You've had time to study that in advance of your session. This is the city's primary budget document, the proposed budget. It's 550 pages from front to back. Discusses all of the different activities, all of the programs, departments, all of the goals, strategic initiatives for the city for the coming year. There's a background on the city's demographics and all of the different things that make up the budget in whole. There are some narrative sections and, of course, pictures, and we have this designed to be user-friendly. The book itself is available for review at City Hall. It's available at the 2 Jefferson County libraries within the city of Lakewood for folks to look and review. And, of course, it's also available at lakewood.org, as you would imagine. In addition, we have the sort of the accountant's version of the city's budget, really finite details. This is another 165 pages of detail, breaks down all of the revenues and expenses for all the various programs. We present a large amount of data as well. But this is just numbers and rows and columns. There aren't any pictures or graphs, those kinds of things. We try to appeal to all audiences and produce as much information as possible. However, we do keep sustainability in mind, and so when the budget is adopted, which it must be adopted by November 1st, we will not produce the final city budget on paper. It will be electronic or digital only on the city's website, and it can be downloaded. Sections can be printed as the user wishes, but we want to keep the number of pages produced to as small a number as possible. So again, no new information for council tonight, just a general overview, talk about some of the things coming in the future, and orient the public generally to the coming year. while I've just talked about the meetings that City Council has had, I want to just use this as an opportunity to talk about a couple of things. First of all, the city has a budget and audit committee. This is a committee of 3 citizens and 3 council members. Mr. Donald Tallman, Mr. Tim Dennis, and Mr. John Ludwigson are local citizens that serve on this committee. They've served for a number of years. The committee meets as needed, typically about each quarter, to look at the income and expenses, sort of the profit and loss statement for the city, to see how things are shaping up compared to budget. Of course, we put all of that information online as well. This committee reviews the financial audit of the city as well and previews all of the budget estimates and so forth. Forgive me, I forgot to mention that council members Coop, Kellen, and King also serve on the budget and audit committee. I beg your pardon. Then, of course, I mentioned that just 3 weeks ago, council had its in-depth study session. It's a very interactive presentation. We talk about last year's events. We talk about how things are going this year. Projections for 2014. It's very in-depth. I was joined at the podium by my colleagues, Deputy City Manager Nanette Nealon, our Public Works Director Jay Hutchison, and our Director of Planning Travis Parker, where we talked about a lot of different initiatives that are happening. That session was recorded in these chambers and is available on KLTV8 for anybody who's interested, wants to go back and have a look at the discussion and some of the things that occurred there. So I have on here tonight our event, September 9th, budget public hearing. We do, as the mayor mentioned, have this on the agenda as a bit of a special occasion. It's really one of the only ordinances of the city that must be adopted via 2 public hearings, and that's prudent. It gives the public the opportunity to comment and provide feedback not once, but twice. And the next public hearing and budget adoption will be scheduled for 3 weeks from tonight on September 30th. And while you might think, the budget's adopted, we're finished, we're ready for 2014, 4 weeks after the adoption, the committee will be getting back together for its regular meeting on October 28th. We have some updates on some business activities that are occurring. We want to make the committee aware of that. And then we still want to take a look at what's happened in the most recent quarter in terms of year-to-date revenue. So the city's budget process is really 12 months a year, because after the adoption, we're measuring how things are going compared to plan. Well, I want to just orient the public to some things that are happening across the country related to city or municipal finances that I think are profound and will shape some of the decisions that will occur right here in Lakewood. For one, the bankruptcy of the city of Detroit, Michigan is very unprecedented. It's unprecedented. I think that says enough. This community of Detroit is facing many of the challenges that the Gulf Coast states faced during the Hurricane Katrina tragedy. This is really impacting the way investors and property owners think about municipal finance. So we have to take that into consideration, think about that. Also, the second bullet point, the President of the United States and our Congress are considering deleting the tax-exempt status of municipal debt. That would have an impact to Lakewood. If Lakewood was to borrow money in the future, it would be doing that perhaps without that tax-exempt status and paying more interest on those borrowings. So that's another thing for us to be considering as we're looking forward. And then lastly, just this last May, the United States Senate adopted the Marketplace Fairness Act. The House of Representatives are looking at that now. Not too much has occurred since then, but what this would do is require online retailers, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute in my next slide, what that really means. But it would require those online retailers to be fair with Main Street, Lakewood, and Main Street USA in collecting sales taxes on the sales that it makes online. And so this could have an impact on our budget and our community as well. Okay, down to more of a micro level to talk a little bit about the income of the city. I have here this pie chart. This has been audited, and these are exact and precise numbers. But as you can see, our general fund income of the city, it's about a $100 million revenue budget. 60% is coming from the sales and use tax. Sales and use tax can be unpredictable. It can vary from year to year. We saw that during the recession. This is based on what consumers and businesses are spending on ordinary consumption. We saw during the recession, and I reported to you, Mayor and Council, that during the recession, the city's change in sales tax revenue is over $9 million during that period of time. That is unpredictable. It's a volatility that we plan into our budget. We know that consumers their confidence can vary from day to day, quite honestly, based on what's happening out there with employment, investment, and other things. There can be changes to the tax base. We've had that in the city and in the state in terms of what's subject to tax. That is subject to change and can change this mix of revenue. Also, as I've been talking, technology really has changed the way we buy things. I used to ask for a poll of audiences, how many people have bought things online? And that's sort of a silly question now because practically everybody has. Now my question is how many people have bought something with their phone, their mobile phone, or their PDA, and people are making purchases that way. Many of those purchases are exempt from sales tax, as I just mentioned. So technology is really changing what's subject to tax in this revenue base. Also, as I've talked about over the years, is that we are spending more as a country on services, medical services and other things. Those things are not subject to sales tax. So again, there's this shifting of supply, demand, and consumerism that's occurring that's right below the surface for our budget. And then last but not least, in terms of the variability and items for consideration, the state of Colorado's Constitution has a taxpayer's Bill of Rights, and that limits the city's general fund income from year to year to a specific amount of growth. Some of those revenues are exempt, but the majority are subject to those limits. So we've got a lot of considerations that go into the income side of the city's budget, and there are variabilities from year to year. We've all seen that, and I think it's important for the public to know that while their expectations of service certainly are very consistent from year to year, the income for those services can vary quite a bit. I think that's a real important element of the city's budget. Well, I'm going to move forward from these lofty and somewhat academic, maybe even theoretical in some cases, concepts to really some nuts and bolts. I'm asked often, what's new in the budget? I used to be asked last decade what might be deleted from the budget, but we're not doing that. It's more of what's being added or what's changing. First one here is streetlight power, and I've got an asterisk next to that. That's because this would be an ongoing addition to the budget. It's not something we pay for one time in 2014, but it's something that our engineers believe we'll be paying on into the future, 2015 and beyond. So I've got an asterisk next to that. Some of my next ones don't have that. Streetlight power. These are the lights that come on at night that light up the sidewalks and the streets, obviously. And as you'll see in a minute, again, providing for this service or services and supplies in our operating budget is significant. And if you the reason I've got all these numbers is show you what's been spent in the past. Our current budget this year is $1,498,000. That's the number that I'd like to note. And then you see our plan adds that $316,000. That's a 21% increase, and obviously a significant amount of money. But we've got to keep these lights going. Again, the public expects them to be on. This is that ongoing service, and you recall what I was just talking about with revenue. So we do need to increase that. Our engineers have spent that amount in 2010, 11, and 12, or nearly that amount. And so far this year to date, their extrapolation is more like the 1.8 million neighborhood. So we've had to add that into our budget. There's no way to, have those lights on just a smaller amount of time, et cetera. This is just something that the community is facing. More nuts and bolts. We are responsible for replacing those light poles, and we believe that in the coming year, this is going to be $273,000. We're going to continue to evaluate that and look for some remedial action. In that case, we have the ability to make replacements with light poles of different materials that can be more durable to the environment, and that will reduce that cost over time. But again, $273,000. And I've just put up a couple of things here. One, we have a few projects from 2012 that we want to carry forward related to our new sales tax computer system, our police department's e-ticketing program, and we have some records consulting projects that we need to wrap up. And then last but not least, Council made a very strong commitment to its Advisory Commission for an Inclusive Community. Forgive me, I've just got ACIC up here. But the recommendation from the Advisory Commission was that funding be added for sustainability programming. And you'll notice this does have an asterisk, so this is ongoing. And even though we're only allowed to adopt a one-year budget, there's this commitment that these elements with an asterisk will carry forward in 2015 and beyond. Sustainability is obviously very important to the community, and this funding will provide for that. Okay, the operating budget is made up of these services and supplies. That's about 25% of our expenses. The other 75% is in the area of personnel. And the city is continually evaluating its workforce and personnel. We have over 900 full-time positions from our police department, public works, et cetera. And the need for very few, but some specific services do vary from year to year. This first one, we have one part-time position. It's filled with an individual. That person is working nearly 40 hours per week. We want to bring that person up. These next two bullets, provisional planner and senior plans examiner, we have people in those job titles now, but they're driven significantly by new development activities in the community. We've reached a point where we're beyond the recession, and we're seeing a lot of activities in this area, and it's time to add some staff to those particular areas. And then lastly, land development project manager. This is a role that does not exist at the city at the moment. We're in the final implementation stages. We need to have the budget adopted for any of these positions to move forward, of course. I think that's obvious. That's why they're a part of the budget, why they're a part of tonight's presentation. These are new endeavors. And land development project manager, we're refining the description of that. So, services and supplies, personnel, last but not least, capital, and we do have some things happening there. First, the Public Works Department is excited to implement a new level of service in its snow plowing. Our citizens value this service. They expect it, they count on it, and they deserve this service. Our Public Works Department believes that by implementing 3 wing plows, and if you'll bear with me, the presenter, this to the side of this plow, you see this extra plow blade. That's the wing that comes out. It enables us to make fewer passes, fewer plows out there, but better plowing services. So each of these plows is $21,000. We're going to implement 3 of those on our existing units and raise the level of service. Should that be successful, as we think it will be, there may be a need for some additions there. More nuts and bolts. Our police department needs to upgrade its criminal justice information system, and this allows them to track and mine data related to crimes. This money will go for hardware, software, maintenance, and training of personnel. Again, a capital project. Our cultural center here at Lakewood Civic Center is now 13 years old. It needs to have some updates. I have here cultural center seating, and that doesn't really do the project justice. We're going to be adding some disabled persons features and amenities for greater access for the community, upgrading some of the lighting and so forth to really bring our cultural center where it needs to be in the market. That'll occur next summer and in our 2014 budget. And then last and certainly not least, and I do have more slides on this because I've noticed an interest in the public, a greater interest in the recent past around the Civic Center project, which really has 3 main elements I'm going to dive into here in a moment. This has been a classic pay-as-you-go project. City Council funded monies for this project in 2012, 2013, and now in your 2014 budget because it is a phased project. And you've just now seen the real heavy activities here at Civic Center, but do know that last year there was a lot of design, evaluation, and so forth going into the project. This is Lakewood Civic Center, and I'm going to try to use the electronic mouse here, and I apologize, that's a little difficult to see, but essentially, this is the city's public safety building, which is our municipal courts, information technology and police department. There's a pedestrian bridge. Our Civic Center North building, which ends right here on this corner. This is the King Soopers shopping building. This is Civic Center South, where we are tonight, and then these are commercial shopping buildings at Michael's and Ross Dress for Less, etc. So just to orient you, this is the drive aisle, which is elevated, and beneath this drive aisle and the Civic Center buildings is a parking garage. So hopefully that gives everyone a feel. Everyone here in Chambers tonight has seen this facility, but anybody watching at home wouldn't have. The challenges on this project are around drainage, slab deterioration, and I'll show you some pictures. And then, of course, in Colorado, we have snow that is frozen, it thaws, it refreezes, and that creates significant impact on the project. So downstairs, beneath where I'm standing in our garage structure, you see the leakage that's occurring here and some of the deterioration. Up on the plaza, you notice that it's becoming unsustainable, the level of deterioration. So our city council has stepped forth and said it's time for us to fund this project. It may take a few years. It's going to take a few years to reconstruct, but the conditions are worsening. They're not improving, and they're not holding. We also have some safety issues in terms of folks walking around the campus. We have a lot of visitors. This is the front door to our cultural center, as I mentioned here on this level, the upper level. And then lastly, because of the load that large vehicles put on the drive aisle, we've now had to restrict that access to lighter weight vehicles, which impacts the opportunity for our older adult community and our school buses to access the cultural center from a very close proximity, as they have to park a little distance away, and that's a bit of a diminished level of service. So I mentioned the challenges. Here are some of the things that will be accomplished in the project. First, on the drive line, as I mentioned, is to make this, the drive lane, is to make this safe and durable so that school buses, et cetera, can access that. With the garage, pretty obvious, we need to get it sealed up. And then lastly, on the plaza, not just make this maintainable, but perhaps add some features that can accommodate events. So here are some more specifics about this, and I thank you for indulging me a little time because there seems to be a growing interest in this. First, we want to have a written maintenance plan. Second, we've gotten feedback that automobiles traveling across the drive lane they're going a little too fast, and there are a lot of pedestrians and so forth. We want to make some changes there. That's the second bullet point. Of course, I mentioned the school bus. We also want to add some weather protection for some of our patrons. They can come and go out of the weather or remain out of the weather. And then probably one of the biggest things is to have a thermal snow melt system for the plaza and the sidewalk, so that we can avoid these freeze-thaw situations. Of course, it goes out saying waterproofing. We do want to have the pavers in there instead of just the concrete slab. It'll be a nicer feature, but also functional. Mr. Hutchison, our Public Works Director, mentioned earlier that we can add some soft features, these sculpture platforms and planters and so forth. We want to move forward with energy-efficient lighting and some shade structures. I probably should have left. Last but not least, one of the questions we're getting is, yes, the water fountain will remain during the warm months at Civic Center. Not to worry. And Jay is the one who mentioned that. So what are we doing with the schedule? I mentioned there are jackhammer crews here at City Hall. On the drive line, it's going to be done in 2 phases. We're nearing the end of summer here, so weather is always a variable. It particularly was today, coincidentally. And so we need to keep that in mind. The plaza will occur next year, and that's primarily the funding from the 2014 budget, as I mentioned. And then the garage will be phased with both of those projects, just in terms of both safety and operational efficiency. This map is just that aerial and shows the closure around the drive lane, around the roundabout from Allison, above Virginia. You do see where we have the no parking, where this is closed. That's very evident. You won't miss it. I promise you that. And then you can see where we are tonight versus some of the other elements that I showed there. We do have a website link where we have up-to-date information about if you're bringing your family and friends to theater or you want to understand what's happening at Civic Center, you can look us up here at Civic Center Refresh. And we look forward to seeing the progress on the project here for the next nearly 18 months. As I mentioned, pay as you go, it's a multi-million-dollar project, but it was a great way in the budget to really kind of digest that cost. Okay, down to the sort of the bottom line here as it was. I mentioned earlier the city's revenues and expenses, and you need to add 3 zeros to this. This is $102,080,000. You see our expenses. This is an operating basis. You see obviously a consumption of the city's reserves. That's about 1.7%. However, last year we were able to work very hard as a management team to save onwards of 4.5%. I don't think that'll occur in 2014. That's going to be quite a challenge. It's just not sustainable to be able to do that from year to year. But I think there can be some savings, perhaps enough to bridge that gap or at least narrow it. And that's on the operating side. I mentioned that from general fund reserves, $1,400,000. That's for the final phase of the Civic Center, as I've just discussed. And so if you have a look at the ordinance, you'll see these numbers presented in a little bit greater detail, and then not just the general fund, but all of the other funds of the city, if you've looked at that. Last but not least, in terms of the technical aspects of the city budget, but what I'd want the public to be aware of is that I talked a little bit ago about the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. And a few years ago, our state began hearing about the ratchet effect, and you may begin hearing me talk a little bit about this, and council members and other folks in the community. From 2008 to 2012, during the recession, the city's property tax declined 6.5%. That was our actual collection last year. And remember that property taxes are always collected in arrears, right? They're not collected in advance. So we're still a year behind. So this would probably reflect the bottom of the recession, our 2012 collections. I anticipate a rebound there, absolutely. But do know that the property taxes, which is the second largest source of income in the general fund, will not be allowed to grow faster than the rate allowed under Tabor. So that could present some challenges. I don't think that the allowed growth under CPI or CPI plus growth has ever been this 6.5%. So ironically, if the market completely rebounds and we see that return, the city will not be able to collect all of the property tax that it collected in 2008. So it's going to be a budget item for council and management to wrestle with in the coming year. We're going to be watching this very close. I just want to mention that because I'd be remiss if I didn't raise it now as opposed to sometime in the future. So enough of the technical details. Let me just close up here with just a few more things that I think are important to have on the city clerk's record. First, we do have some legal requirements. We have state law requiring our reserves to be at least 3%. This budget meets that and then some. The city's charter requires beginning funds, meaning cash on hand fund balances, will exceed expenditures when revenue is added. Check mark there, that's done. The city manager will submit her proposed budget by September 15th. That was done on August 19th. We're right on schedule there. And then last but not least, the thing that needs to get done is the budget needs to be adopted by November 1st. And as I mentioned, we're anticipating a second public hearing and adoption on September 30th. And I've got that listed here. Also on September 30th, we will have a separate meeting of the city's Urban Renewal Authority, the Lakewood Reinvestment Authority, where it will adopt its budget as well on that night. That concludes my presentation, and as I mentioned, my fellow department heads are here behind me, and we're happy to entertain any questions, and thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Great job as always. As you heard, we are at least budgeting to use some money from reserves in 2014. You've all heard us say many times that we, for 8 straight years in this city, have added money to our fund balance, spent less than we brought in through some of the most difficult economic times that any of us have ever seen. And we've done so without laying off staff, without furloughs, and by giving appropriate market raises through that whole process. So we're very proud of our management team and the way they take care of our taxpayer dollar. This is an opportunity, and in the case of the plaza and driveway out here, a need to use some money from reserves. So with that, I'm going to open up the public comment portion of this phase one of our budget public hearing. No one's indicated a desire to speak on the budget by signing up on the roster. Anyone in chambers wish to speak? All right, with that, I will close the public comment portion and remind everyone that we do have the second public hearing on September 30th, and you'll certainly have another opportunity that evening, or certainly in the 3 weeks between now and then, to speak with any of us about this. So I'm ready for a motion. You know what? I think I'm going to wait on what we have to do procedurally is vote to schedule this for a second reading on September 30th. But before we do that, we'll take council comment and questions. Councilor Wickman.
I realize tonight we're just it's a first reading to schedule this, but I wanted to ask a clarification question on the procedures. What would be the appropriate time during these three meetings for me to bring up my proposal about the having a moratorium on the stormwater fee? When would be the time for me to bring that up?
I think, well, I'll get to the procedural in a minute. I think out of courtesy, we can hear you out right now.
Okay.
You can.
Okay, I was assuming it'd be later. My proposal is that we do a moratorium on our stormwater fee for 1 year. It would be about $2.5 million. What I would like to do is I'd like to use that money as kind of a stimulus for the people, the families of Lakewood. I'd like to return that money to them. And of course, the obvious question is, how would we pay for that? And I guess I would propose that we take that out of reserves. The $2.5 million, I calculate that would be less than 10% of our reserves. Anyway, that would be my proposal at whatever the appropriate point would be.
So just to clarify for the rest of council and the public, you're proposing that we pay for the stormwater fund, a moratorium on the stormwater fund out of the reserves of the general fund?
Yes, that's correct.
Councilor Wickman, are you aware that the stormwater fund is an enterprise fund and the general fund is a different fund?
Yes, but to the best of my knowledge, I think we can transfer funds from one account to another.
Well, certainly paying from one fund, government fund, to another government fund is questionable accounting. That's not how we got to where we are. Are you aware of how the money is collected for the stormwater fund?
Yes.
Are you aware that it primarily comes from commercial property owners like Walmart and Target and so on?
Yes.
Are you aware that it's a fee?
Yes.
So you're proposing that we backfill a fee which is largely paid for by commercial property owners with a tax which is paid for by our residents?
Yes.
Wow. Diana?
My first question is, what's the driver behind this? Why? I mean, have people been complaining to you about the stormwater fee, or did you just come up with this idea on your own, or where did it come from?
Oh yeah, it's been a big complaint for years and years. Families are always asking, is there some way they can, save that $25? So yeah, this has been a long time agenda item, and I think now's the time to, since our finances are in relatively good shape after these 4 years, I think now would be the time to explore the option.
Councilor Barraway.
I wasn't finished.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say I've been on council for 8 years and I've never had anybody complain to me about the stormwater fee. So just to clarify that, but also in case it wasn't clear before, the fee is charged primarily and paid for by commercial enterprises. And if we use the tax money to backfill it, we're actually using everyday people's money, sales tax dollars, to pay for that instead. So I don't understand how we'd be doing people a favor that way. So just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Councillor Barraway and then Councillor Quinn.
Thank you. And kind of to Councillor Wilson's point, and just in the 6 years I've been on council, if anything, especially in Ward 2 and the Ward 1 area, all I've heard about is what can we do to improve our stormwater utilities that we have, because if you may know, this last summer we've had 3 times of flooding, and it hit the old part of Lakewood pretty hard, and that's where this money goes. And for $24 a year out of one household, I think that's a pretty good shot for your money to get some improvements made in your stormwater management. And I don't know how that's necessarily going to impact somebody's life on a year basis to save $24, when as collectively as a whole, if we can use that money, we're going to make the improvements that are needed or be able to take care of the repairs that are needed when they come about. So in addition to that, with urban flood and drainage control, we have to, if we want any money from them, we have to put in 50% of our money to get that money. So if we don't have any money to give them, I think we're just doing a disservice to our citizens as opposed to trying to help them.
If I may, again, I'm not suggesting that we not pay for our stormwater. It's a matter of which fund that it would come out of. Like I said, I think we can pay for it out of reserves.
So do you know how much money we have in the stormwater management fund currently, and how much is in the reserves there?
Well, I know in reserves we've been talking about over 30 million.
No, that's the general.
General fund, yeah. As far as
No,
in the stormwater, I don't have that number off the top of my head, no.
Maybe you should do your research.
Okay, so, look, we've got a suggestion here that is, by the way, out of order. I'll get to that in a second. But certainly the suggestion that we transfer money from one governmental fund, which is an enterprise fund, collected by fees, and supplement that with another governmental fund, which is paid for by the taxes of our citizens, is, I'm not sure it meets our high ethical standards here in the city of Lakewood. It's just not the way, I'm not sure it's even legal. I'm just going to shut down this discussion with another procedural note. Councillor Wickman did this a couple of weeks ago, and the fact of the matter is that he's still, I guess after 4 years, just hasn't quite learned the procedures, or maybe because it's election season, doesn't care, but stormwater management is an ordinance. And you can't undo an ordinance with a motion at a council meeting. You undo an ordinance with another ordinance. And that's the way things work under our charter. So it's out of order. It's not a particularly good idea, and it's out of order. So I'm not going to entertain the motion, and I'm going to close the discussion. So with that, I'm ready for a motion on the scheduling of the second and final public hearing on the budget for September 30th. Councillor Barraway.
Mayor Murphy, I move to have ordinance O 2013-21 on first reading to be published in the Denver Post newspaper for the second public hearing to be set on September 30th at 7 p.m.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, please cast your votes. And the motion carries. We will have the second public hearing on the 2013 revised 2014 budget on September 30th. We'll now move on to the featured attraction this evening, and that is the annexation, zoning, and inclusion of Ward 3, of something known as the Taylor parcel. Ward 3, Kathy, it was a little slip of the tongue. Well, yeah, Ward 4 says they'll take it. Each of these is a separate ordinance, a separate process. One, as I said, is the annexation. Under state law, when you annex a piece of property into a municipality, you're required at the same time to zone it. So that's ordinance number 2. And then ordinance number 3 is the inclusion of that property within the political boundaries of a ward in the city of Lakewood, in this case, Ward 3. So To simplify things, we are going to open the public hearing on all three of the ordinances at once. And in a moment, I'll ask our city clerk to read them all into the record. We will address all of the ordinances, or each of the three ordinances at once via the presentations, via public comment, and via council questions and action following public comment. At the end of all that, we will, however, vote on each of the ordinances individually as required by law. So, clear? All right. Ms. Greer.
Okay, the public hearing consists of item 10, ordinance O 2013-18, annexing certain property to be known as the Taylor annexation, located in the east one half of section 26, township 4 south, range 69, west of the 6th principal meridian, county of Jefferson, state of Colorado. And item 11, ordinance O 2013-19, zoning certain property located in the east one half of section 26, township 4 south, range 69, west of the 6th principal meridian, county of Jefferson, state of Colorado, to the residential 1-acre lot, R143 zone district. And item 12, ordinance O 2013-20, incorporating certain real property into municipal Ward 3 boundary for the city of Lakewood, Colorado.
Okay, we're going to start with a presentation from the applicant, in this case the applicant's representative. I would ask Elliot Hoyt from Design Workshop to come forward and begin the proceedings. Elliot.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name is Elliot Hoyt. I'm a principal at Design Workshop at 1390 Lawrence Street in Denver, 80204. I would like to introduce a few people that are here as well. Mr. John Lambert, who prepared the annexation map, Mr. Alan Schwartz of the law firm Sherman and Howard, and, and then Mr. Vernon Taylor, who's the trustee for the Vernon F. Taylor Jr. Property Trust, which owns the property, and I would like to introduce him so that he could say a few words to the council.
Thank you, Elliot, and I want to thank the City Council for taking time out today from, I'm sure, what is a very busy schedule to visit the property and familiarize ourselves with both the property and the house. We, as a family, and speaking for my brothers, we are delighted that you're seriously considering annexation. In fact, we'll vote on it tonight of this property. We feel, and this is shared by my family, that Lakewood is without question one of the best governed municipalities in Metro Denver area, and with a heightened environmental sensitivity and sense of responsibility, which is very important to us as a family. Just a few words on the property. You saw it today. It's 122 acres. It's a house that my family, my parents bought in 1951. We've obviously been there for 62 years. I grew up there. It is my father's stated wish that this property stay intact and stay as it is, as best we can, preserve it. And that is something I will do in my fiduciary to the best of my ability to see that it stays as it is and is not developed intensively. So we thank you for your consideration tonight, and we again thank you for the time you spent today to come out and have an interest, express an interest in this property. Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's my job to give you the actual presentation of what is being proposed here. I think Mr. Taylor obviously expresses very clearly from the family's perspective of why they want this property annexed into the city of Lakewood. So I'll say a few other things about why it's appropriate to annex it. I will also discuss, because as part of annexation we need to select a zoning for this property. So I'll explain where we came up with the zoning that we're requesting at this time. I'd like to also make it clear that this presentation has no aspect of development of the property, because that's not the intention of the family. The intention of the family is to annex it, have it annexed into the city. There are no development plans. There are no plans for road connections or different kinds of access. The plan is to keep the property used as it is now. And I just want to make that clear that that's why that there are no aspects of this presentation that deal with that. And again, just to reiterate that, as Mr. Taylor said, that the family, the trust feels it's appropriate to annex it into the city of Lakewood because of the sense of shared values of this very important piece of property in this community. So just to give a sense of context for people who may not be familiar where the property is, as Mr. Taylor said, it's 122.3 acres. It's a fairly significant sized piece of land, especially for a municipality of the sort. So size alone makes this a special piece of property, but it is much more than just a large piece of land. It is a very, very special property with extraordinary views and a great history and just a beautiful jewel within the community. So as you can see, it is bordered to the west by Wadsworth Boulevard. On the east is Ward Lake, which is a private lake, private reservoir. To the south, there is one parcel which is a little bit difficult to see here. There's a piece of the property which is a lot within this subdivision along Vassar Avenue. And then, of course, on the north, it has a fairly significant boundary with the former Green Gables Country Club. And so this is a plan of the property showing the adjacent jurisdictions. It also shows that it is made up of 5 tax parcels, 4 of which are in this application. So as I mentioned before, this parcel on the south side that is in the subdivision along Vassar is not included in the annexation request because it is already part of the city of Lakewood. So we're talking about these tax parcels here, one of which in the center there where the house is residential, and the others which are agricultural use currently. Just to walk people through a few elements of the property. This is an aerial photograph of the property. You can see that the family home is here. The property is annexed along West Lake Ridge Road currently. This is a private drive that comes into the house here. There is sort of a lawn and some tennis courts and so forth. There's some buildings here that are garages and so forth. There's some caretaker buildings that are for people who care for the property and for the horses. There's a barn. There's a strong tradition of keeping horses and riding on this property. The family also has always produced hay, and so the agricultural use is active, certainly. These areas here are irrigated and cut for hay. This is pasture here. There are 2 irrigation ditches that run through the property. You can see the frontage here along the lake. There's a small boathouse. And this is called Ward Reservoir 2. It's a small lake for holding water as part of the water rights of the property. This is a sloped area. It's difficult to see from an aerial photograph, but there's sort of a break in the land that happens here, and the ground slopes down to the properties down below it. This tends to be kept in just native vegetation, and you'll hear maybe some people say today, and certainly Mr. Taylor could tell you stories of the amount of wildlife that can be seen on this property through the seasons. It's quite remarkable. I've seen it myself in the few visits that I've had on the property. It's quite special within a city to have that kind of open space. So it's a special part of it as well. So just a few photographs, and these do not do justice to the property, obviously, but it's the best that I can offer in this particular context. As you approach the house along the driveway, which is currently the only access to the property, just to reiterate, there are no development plans for the property. There's no plans to create any other access points for the property. If there were to be development of the property, other access points would have to be created, and if this were to be annexed into the city of Lakewood, they would have to go through the process of being approved and vetted through public hearings and so forth. So just to make that point clear. Currently, the access on the driveway here to the house, this is a view looking along that with pastures on either side. As you come through, this is a view into the home itself. And this is a view, if you were driving along this driveway and you look to your left, you would see the front range across this pasture here, and you just get a glimpse of what it's like to be on that property and feel like you're very far away from the city. It's quite special. These are some other views from within the property. This view here shows the boathouse, the small boathouse on Ward Lake. You can see across the lake the country club building from Green Gables. This pasture here often has horses in it. And you can see this is what it looks like in a greener day than when I took that first photo. This is Ward Reservoir number 2. You see it's a small body of water there, but quite pastoral. And finally, a few images of the perimeter of the property, which is how most people, I suppose, are familiar with it. On the south, let me begin there. This is the lot on Vassar Avenue that the Taylors own. It is just kept as open space, and the intention is to keep it as open space while the family's owning it. It is occasionally accessed by equipment that is used to mow the grass that's on this side of the hill and to keep the property in good maintenance. And so that's the only access that's used for currently, and the only access that's planned is just to help maintain the current status of the property. This north edge of the property, as I mentioned, it's a large boundary with the former Green Gables golf course, which now, of course, is under development by another party, and certainly is something that the Taylors paid very careful attention to in the process by which the Green Gables property went through in terms of being developed. Was not the process that they would ever want to see have happened to their property if it was to be developed. So that is part of what has triggered this discussion about the appropriateness of this property being part of the city of Lakewood. You can see, though, looking to the west, that the views are quite remarkable from this pasture here. And then again, the final image here is within the property, but I think anyone who's driven Wadsworth Boulevard, that is how most people who know the property to any degree would know it from that edge. And it's an open space edge. It's a fence along there, but you only see a very small portion of the property, really. So now, if I can turn to some technical matters. You can see from this plan that the Taylor property is surrounded on 3 sides, almost completely, by the city of Lakewood. There's a small portion of the city and county of Denver that touches it, and then, of course, the northern boundary of Green Gables is unincorporated Jefferson County. In the 60 or so years that the Taylors have lived here, the surrounding area has obviously grown and developed to a great degree. It is urbanized now with all of the uses and services that implies. I'd also like to point out that the Jefferson County South Plains Area Plan, which covers this area, calls for a density of 4 to 7 dwelling units per acre, which demonstrates that within the county comp plan, there's an expectation that there's more growth in this particular area of the community. I'd like to point out that the neighbors surrounding this property have been notified as is proper in this process. And we had a neighborhood meeting in this chamber, and thank you for lending the chamber to us. It was very convenient. And the comments, we've received a number of comments, and I know city staff will speak to this specifically, but just to acknowledge that the comments that have been expressed so far have primarily had to do with development plans or road access or other kinds of transportation impacts, which is a very common concern within communities that have to do when there's development proposed. There is no development proposed here. So when and if there was a time that development was proposed, then obviously those would need to be addressed. But we don't have a response for those because there's no development proposed here. And I just wanted to, sorry, I think I've already mentioned the fact that, again, if and when there were to be development proposed, the family would want it to happen within the city of Lakewood's processes, which are held to a very high standard, and we appreciate those. So let me now touch upon the zoning point. As part of the process, we need to identify a zoning category. The zoning category that we selected most closely matches the existing use, which is the purpose here. So that's R143. Just to note that the piece that's not within this application is already zoned within the city of Lakewood as R2. We selected a lower zoning density for the piece that's being proposed here, because we think it is frankly the lowest density possible within the city zoning code, and we think it's most appropriate. It also allows for the agricultural activity that the family conducts and wants to continue to conduct on the property, and it allows for the keeping of horses, which is also very important to the family and to the heritage of this particular home. If I may just read briefly the definition of R143. It is a residential 1 acre district. The R143 district is intended to protect and enhance existing rural character, uses, densities, and standards while providing for low intensity use of land, single family detached residential development, and other compatible uses. So that's the category that fits the existing use, and that's what we were looking for. It is the same as much of the land, and you'll see this in the staff report, as much of the land surrounding it. It is less dense than what is in the comprehensive plan, in the South Plains Area Plan, the 4 to 7 dwelling units per acre. It's much less than that. I want to also address the fact that it came up in Planning Commission, question of why isn't planned development or PD zoning category selected for this. And I just want to say that there is no development planned, and so it seems counterintuitive to suggest planned development. What we're looking for is something that we can annex the property, get it zoned, because that's part of the category of annexing, but we're proposing to leave it as is. So we would like the zoning category that allows the family to continue using it as is. And that's where we came to that conclusion. I would like to just wrap up by outlining what we have done as part of this process. We did the pre-planning application, and that instructed us to conduct a neighborhood meeting, which we did, and we had a very good turnout, and we had a very good conversation and discussion. We went through the formal annexation and zoning application. We presented to the Planning Commission, and again, had a public hearing at that point, and good discussion of the points that came up. And today we're here in front of you after the first reading, obviously. We're now on the second reading. And so I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyt. And we'll get to the question and answer period shortly. Next, we'll ask for the staff presentation, and for that we will have Mark Doring, Principal Planner, step forward.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. I'm Mark Doring with the Planning Department. I'm here tonight to talk to you about the annexation and the zoning of the Taylor property, which is located at 6900 West Lake Ridge Road. And then when I'm done with my presentation, I'll turn it over to Margaret Greer for the discussion about the inclusion into Ward 3. The applicants are here tonight to provide their application regarding an annexation into the city of those parcels that Elliot discussed. Those parcels total 122.3 acres, and they're also proposing to zone it to the 1 acre lot residential zone district, or the R143. They are not proposing any additional development, as Elliot stated. They're not proposing to do any new structures on the property. They're not proposing to do any new roads on the property. And they're not proposing to subdivide to create any more lots on the property. Those would all be done through separate applications. So we're here tonight to strictly seek the annexation into the city and give it a zoning, and then Margaret will follow up with the inclusion into the ward. Do want to talk a little bit about the process. We are starting this process. We went to City Council, came before this board back in July to accept the annexation petition, and that acceptance of the petition starts the shot clock that are required under state statutes. Those state statutes basically state that no earlier than 30 and no later than 60 days from the date of that acceptance of the petition, you're going to hold a hearing to make a determination on the annexation. And we are also bringing forward the zoning along with that. We did take it forward to the Planning Commission. That did go to the Planning Commission on August 7th. They did make a recommendation to this council to make a recommendation of approval with the annexation and approval of the zoning. They included a condition to make sure that the applicants included the property into the Alameda Water and Sanitation District as part of the annexation application. The property prior to the board district's meeting on August 14th, there was only one parcel out of those 5 that Elliot discussed that was actually within the Alameda Water and Sanitation District. So they went to the Alameda Water and Sanitation District Board to seek inclusion of those other parcels into the district, and they completed that on August 14th. So we are bringing it forward here to City Council. We had first reading to set that hearing, which is why we're here tonight, just to make a decision on the annexation and the zoning. I won't gloss over the location a little bit. Do want to note on the screen before you is an aerial photograph. The subject property is shown in white. As Elliot discussed, Lakewood is on three sides of this property. City and County of Denver is directly abutting the property to the south, and the Green Gables Golf Course development to the north is still within the county. The applicants also own that lot, as Elliot discussed. That lot along the north side of Vassar Avenue is in Fellman subdivision filing number 1 and is already in the city of Lakewood and is zoned as R2 or small lot and duplex residential. I know we've received some comments from those folks, and I believe there were some folks here from that subdivision who will be providing comment on that. So the application is for all those lands that are in the county outside of that one lot. Next, I do want to talk a little bit about the subject property zoning and the surrounding properties. On the site, you'll see before you is highlighted in yellow. To the north of that, up at the top, is the Green Gables Golf Course development. That is zoned Planned Unit Development, or PUD, in Jefferson County. That PUD does allow for residential on the eastern portion. That would be single family and duplex residential. And then at the southwest corner of that property is some multifamily residential that has approved. And then to the north of that, in this general direction, is the approval for commercial land uses. And then as we swing into the city of Lakewood to the west, there are properties that are zoned R16 or small lot residential. You'll see a large lot here right at the northwest corner. That is currently a church. And as we move down, you'll see this red section, there's a MES zone district, or mixed use employment suburban. That is a zone district that you would see office buildings, and that's in fact what are on those properties to the west. And then as we get to the southwest corner, there is a property that's zoned multifamily, and that is the Forest Glen Townhome subdivision. We're going to jump across Wadsworth. We do get to that Fellman subdivision, filing number 1 subdivision in the city of Lakewood. It is zoned R2, which is small lot and duplex residential in the city of Lakewood. And as we move further east, we get into the city and county of Denver. They too have an R2 zone district. However, that R2 zone district is multifamily in the city and county of Denver. So that is some townhomes to the south, I believe. And then as we get back to the southeast corner, we get back into Lakewood. The property there is Thraymore in the Park and is zoned multifamily. And there's one lot directly above that that is zoned large lot residential. And then as we get all along the eastern property, the boundary of in the city of Lakewood, all those properties are zoned residential 1 acre lot, or R143. And that zoning also would apply to Ward Reservoir number 1 for those portions that are within the city. The applicants are seeking to establish R143 zoning on the property and match the adjacent properties to the east. I do want to talk a little bit about our notification requirements. Our zoning ordinance does require notification. Namely, prior to making a formal application, the applicants are required to hold a neighborhood meeting and involve the public. We held that neighborhood meeting here in council chambers on April 2nd. We had about 80 people attend, a lot of interest in the meeting. And summary of that meeting is included within your staff report as attachment H. We've also posted the property with signs on the property, provided that publish in the newspaper, and we've mailed notices. We mailed 585 notices to property owners and registered neighborhood organizations within the city. Additionally, because it is an annexation, it is covered by state statutes, there are some requirements for the annexation in the statutes that are specific to the annexation. So we did provide publication in a newspaper for at least 4 weeks as required. We've also provided notification to the county and to special districts with which the property is located. We provided them written notification of this hearing, and that was sent via certified mail. And then lastly, because the property is over 10 acres, we did distribute what is called an annexation impact report to the county that is used for their planning purposes. We also sent it out to outside agencies and did receive some comments. We received comments from Jefferson County. They asked for that annexation impact report that we just discussed. They also had some questions and concerns. They wanted to make sure that if the property ever develops, that access is given to the Green Gables development via a road. If you remember the Green Gables development, when it came through, they were seeking permission from the city of Lakewood for an intersection with a traffic signal on Wadsworth. Because it didn't meet spacing requirements, the city did not allow it. And we also said, if this property ever develops, you have the ability to connect to Wadsworth at Morrison Road. So that is something that we have provided in our annexation impact report to the county, that if the property ever develops, that's where the access would be for both this property and for the Green Gables for access out to Wadsworth. Additionally, the county also noted that their South Plains area plan does make a recommendation of 4 to 7 dwelling units per acre. So if it ever were to develop, that's what their area plan calls for. And then lastly, they asked to see if we ever get development proposals, they'd like to see the drainage and engineering reports from the development. We also received comments from the Alameda Water and Sanitation District. They made comments about the fact that only one of the parcels was in the district, and so they wanted to make sure that the other parcels were included within their district. And they've been working with the applicants, and that occurred on August 14th after the Planning Commission hearing. And then lastly, we did receive comments from Excel. Excel said they want the ability to provide power and gas to not only this property but to surrounding properties, and they didn't want anything that would hinder that as well. Then I want to move on to neighborhood stakeholders. We did hear a lot of comments from neighborhood stakeholders, a lot of concern over what was going to happen with construction, what are the uses that would be allowed on the property, what's the amount of open space, and what is the possibility of road connections. So to basically sum up, there is no new construction proposed. The uses of both residential and agricultural are allowed on the property. Open space, because they're not proposing any development, that we are not seeking any open space on the property. We do have provisions in our municipal code for the dedication of open space. That's typically done at the time of subdivision. That way you know how many residences you have to provide open space for. And then lastly, the road connections. I know we've had a lot of discussion both at Planning Commission and some correspondence we received afterwards regarding road connections through the surrounding community. And again, we would state there are no road connections being proposed with either the annexation or the zoning. If they are ever done in the future, there are processes that would be in place, not only to have staff review the application, but to also have public hearings for those. We also reviewed the annexation for conformance with 3 things. We looked at our comprehensive plan, which covers our policies for those properties that are within the city. We looked at the 3-mile plan, which is our plan for those areas that are outside the city within 3 miles that have the possibility of being annexed. And for purposes of that 3-mile plan, we defer to Jefferson County on their planning purposes. So we would rely on what the county has provided, which states residential uses on the property of no more than 4 to 7 dwelling units per acre. This obviously complies because it's much less than the 4 to 7 dwelling units. And then lastly, we look at the Colorado Revised Statutes. There are a couple of things in particular that we look at. One, does the property have contiguity? In other words, does it abut up to the city limits? It has to have a minimum of 16%. This property has well over 60% contiguity with the city boundary. And the other provision that is in particular is that the city boundary cannot extend more than 3 miles in any one calendar year, which is why we have a 3-mile plan. This property is well under that 3-mile limit. I do want to talk a little bit about the zoning. The zoning we look at to make sure that it does promote the Lakewood zoning ordinance. It is compatible with the surrounding land uses, and it has at least one of 3 criteria that we look at. And does it implement the comprehensive plan? Is there a change in the character of the area that necessitates that zoning, or is the property zoned in error? Staff did review this and find that it does implement the comprehensive plan. There are goals and elements in the comprehensive plan with this application that we do support it, and staff did find that those have been met, and those are all listed in your staff report. In addition, do want to talk about the engineering requirements because they're not proposing any development. This is rather unique. We didn't require any engineering reports since they're not proposing any roads or proposing any improvements to the drainage in the area. Should those ever occur in the future, staff will require those reports to be submitted, a traffic study, drainage report, preliminary construction plans. So those will be things that we would look at with other applications. And then Elliot walked you through the concept plan that they do have, so I won't touch on that. I have that here. With that, I just would note that the Planning Commission did make a recommendation to City Council that you approve both the annexation and the zoning of the property. And with that, I'll turn it over to Margie to present the application regarding the inclusion into Ward 3. And we'll be available for questions.
Yeah, before we ask Margie to come up, one point I want to punch home that both you and Mr. Hoyt mentioned, and it has to do with the zoning in the county versus the proposed zoning in the city.
Thank you very much.
Acknowledging that there's no subdivision taking place and no plans for development. Should development ever take place, the county would foresee 4 to 7 dwelling units per acre under their current guidelines, right? Under their current plan.
If given the current comprehensive plan,
Right.
the
County would allow 4 to 7 units per
county
acre.
would allow for a rezoning that would allow 4 to 7 dwelling units per acre.
Right. And of course, this is 1 per acre, acknowledging that it's not being developed and not being subdivided.
Correct.
Thank you. Ms. Greer.
Thank you, and good evening. I'm Margie Greer, your city clerk. In looking at incorporating new properties into the city, we went and looked at, I'll bring this up a little closer, you can see how the proposed property is outlined in red. It's kind of a simple decision to make. I think what you really need to take note of is that we're not redrawing any of the boundaries. What is outlined in red is a county precinct that already exists in Ward 3. You can see that this property abuts it on 3 sides, actually, a little piece on 2 sides, I'm sorry, to the south and to the east. And as you know, precincts, the entire precincts have to stay within the boundary of a ward. They can't overlap wards, so it makes kind of easy to incorporate this into that precinct into Ward 3. And that's my proposal for you tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, so our recommendations tonight are for adoption of all 3 of the ordinance that we proposed during this public hearing. And as Mark Doring told you, staff is here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Margie. I'll now open the public comment portion, and a number of folks have signed up on the public comment roster indicating a desire to speak. Our roster kind of has two columns. Well, you got your name and address, but there's two additional columns. One is entitled, "Do you favor the question?" and the second is entitled, "Do you wish to speak?" So what we normally do is call up those who've stated the desire to speak, and we also call out what they've mentioned here in terms of whether they favor the question or not. So we'll start with the first name on the list, Roger Wimmer, and he has indicated that he does favor the question. Mr. Wimmer, do you wish to speak?
Can I defer to my neighbor?
Of course.
He's second.
Sure.
And then I'll go after him.
Oh, all right. Mr. Morris.
Thank you. I'm Jerry Morris. I live at 7225 West Vassar Avenue. I am representing the people of the West Vassar Avenue, also an area known as the Fellman subdivision. We want you to know that we are not opposing the annexation of the Taylor property into the city of Lakewood. I know that Mr. Mark Dorian has stated that neither the Taylors or the city of Lakewood have any plans at this time for the Taylor property that is being annexed. But we have some concerns that we wish to have on record. In 2005, I approached Mr. Taylor and inquired about purchasing the empty lot just east of my property at 7225 West Vassar, and was informed by Mr. Taylor that they had plans for the property. I then went to the city of Lakewood the same year and inquired about the empty lot in question, and was informed by city personnel that that lot was planned to be a street, and that is why our group is concerned. Mr. Mark Dorian has stated that we are premature with our concerns, but we know that if we do not express our concerns about the safety and character of our neighborhood now, it may be too late after the city has developed plans, and inasmuch as the city is planning to hire 4 more planners, there must be something that the city will have them work on. I believe the Taylor property is the only large vacant land of this size in the city. Is this what the planners will be working on? The hearing phase for the planned development is usually after the development has proceeded to almost a buildable stage, and therefore is more difficult to change than if there are some concerns addressed during the planning stage. We all know that progress will happen and something or somebody will develop the Taylor property, but you cannot allow it to be detrimental to the safety of our neighborhood, as shown in the website Mr. Wimmer has posted. We ask the City Council to let the empty lot remain as its historic residential use. We know this council meeting is for the proposed annexation of the Taylor property into the City of Lakewood, and we hope you keep our concerns as a matter of record as this project goes forward. Thank you for listening to our concerns.
Mr. Morris, I've been doing this about 20 years. That's as good a presentation as I've ever heard. Well said, and very fair. Mr. Wimmer. Yeah, we'll get to answer.
My name is Roger Wimmer, W-I-M-M-E-R. I live at 7275 West Vassar, the street in question here. I'm not going to take much time at all. I'm the person who made the website. Well, let me say this first. A couple of years ago, I was with a friend of mine in Alabama. We're the same age. We were trying to fix his lawnmower. Couldn't do it. His 15-year-old grandson came out, bent down, started it, and said, "Y'all are old and you don't know what you're doing." My PhD is in media research and statistics. We got all this information about the streets, what's going to happen, and so on. I put it all together in a website, and I thought it was pretty cool. I'm coming up here purposely to thank publicly Mark Doring for correcting me. He didn't say y'all are old and you don't know what you're doing, but he did correct the things because we heard so many different stories. There's going to be a street here, there's not, and so on. So I'm the one who sent you the website, and if anybody else needs it, I have the link to it. The whole thing is based on, we just want to protect our street. That's the idea. We're not against any Taylors. That property has been there for about 68 million years. I think it's going to last a while. And I'll give this to Mr. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Wimmer. I can run through the names here. Marion Edelin indicates she favors the question and wants to speak. No? Okay. Anna Lyle, same thing, favors the question. You pass? All right. Rosie Glorso? Didn't want to speak, sorry. Carrie Brutag favors the question and passes. Okay. Patty Brutag favors the question and passes. I know you all stood up in support a moment ago. Katie Sanks favors the question, doesn't want to speak. Liz Brewer favors the question. Do you want to speak, Ms. Brewer? Oh, please come on down. Sorry, I was focused stage right over here.
Elizabeth Breuer, and I'm from Lakewood Estates, 6135 West Pacific Circle. First of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Taylor, because I, too, was here as part of Lakewood Estates when you first had the initial meeting. We applaud you for doing this, other than Green Gables, the way that was done. I am just a little bit concerned, though, because I am not understanding. I know that you want to keep this property as it is, but I don't understand with what I'm hearing on the zoning planning. If Jeffco wants to have possibility of property access for roads, if and whenever this becomes developed, is that now written? Is that in stone that they will have that capability of getting?
We'll address that. Yeah.
Getting property access? Okay, that was my main concern, and where that property access would be, I guess.
Yeah, we'll clarify that.
Right, and again, if it were being developed, I heard it again tonight, minimum would be 1 acre lots.
One house per acre.
Oh, okay, real good. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian and Holly Wolf. Yes, favor the proposal, and a maybe on speaking. Oh, yes, he did. All right. That exhausts the list of those who have indicated desire to speak by signing up on the roster. Anyone else, please come on down. And just state your name and address. And it hasn't been even being close to being an issue here. I just remind everyone of the 3-minute time limit and the lights on the podium.
I'd like to thank the council tonight for hearing me. My name is Lynn Notariani, Notarianni, and my address is 6150 West Lake Ridge Road in Lakewood. And I just have very short comments to make tonight. I apologize. I don't recall the notice, and we didn't attend the meeting on April 2nd, and probably should have. This is the first opportunity we've had to listen to it. And first of all, I would like to thank Vernon Taylor for what they are doing. We moved into our home in 1990. We are what I call the last home on the paved road before it turns into a dirt road on Lake Ridge Road. We moved into the neighborhood because you drive in there, and the first thing that hits you, and what I have said for 20 years now, is I love this neighborhood. And then you cross over to what I call the other side of the tracks, which is the dirt road, and you're just mystified at its beauty, and you feel like you're almost in the mountains, and it's just such a different environment. It truly is a unique neighborhood. It's a very all the properties on the dirt road on West Lake Ridge Road, all the way through to Wadsworth, are unique properties. They are absolute gems to Lakewood, and to the extent that the Taylors are willing to keep it the way they are, they've all been fantastic neighbors. It is just something we all treasure. And I'd also like to thank, for as many years as we've been here, the city of Lakewood has been very kind to our neighborhood in supporting whenever there's been development, in making sure that the area stays the way it was intended, with 1 acre lots and bigger properties and ranch style homes and that. So with that being said, we are supportive of what's going on. It sounds like it is important for Lakewood to annex it and to have it be zoned the R1 so they can be the acre lots versus the more dense properties. We came prepared tonight to raise any concerns, if necessary, about access, because it would be tragic to have access all the way from Sheridan through our street over to Wadsworth, because as the roads get busy, people turn in on Lake Ridge and they think they can get all the way through. They get to our house and they turn around and go, oop, it really is a dead end. So we live with a little bit of traffic already, and so we know what the traffic would be like if the two were connected. So from that standpoint, we really appreciate the council being willing to take a look at this and consider it, and we'll leave the street issue for another day should it ever arise. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, with that, I will close public comment with thanks to all the presenters and to the public, and move on to council questions and responses from either the applicant or from staff. Certainly, no lights are on here, but certainly that question of access from Green Gables potentially through the property. Who wants to address that? Travis? All right. Travis Parker, please.
As part of the review for the Green Gables subdivision, the city weighed in on the access to that because we have control of access to both Wadsworth and Jewel. The original proposal for that Green Gables development had a four-way intersection at Wadsworth and Evans, right in the middle of their Green Gables property. That access didn't meet our requirements. It was too close to other stoplights along Wadsworth, and therefore, we required them to only have, or didn't allow them to have a four-way access there, and only allowed them to have a 3/4 turn there. And ultimately, the plan for full build-out of the Green Gables property, if it builds out as planned in their PUD, would have access coming south through the corner of this Taylor property to the intersection of Wadsworth and Morrison Road.
Through the northwest corner of the Taylor.
Through the northwest corner of the Taylor property. That access doesn't exist now. It's not contemplated any time in the near future, but someday, if the Green Gables PUD builds out to its full potential, that property will be required, and the Metro District that runs that property will be required to complete that access to Morrison Road.
Okay. Any clarifications or further questions on that topic? Cindy?
What about the planners, the number of planners that was mentioned?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Travis.
I think there was some misunderstanding at the budget meeting. There are 4 new positions in the entire city this year, only one of whom is a planner, and that is an intern that we already have is becoming a full-time. So even our new planner is an old planner. And the other 3, I believe, are mostly public works and public works.
Building review and that sort of thing.
Right. And then really the planner position is we could use some extra just for the everyday stuff that goes on in the city, not necessarily for some large 122-acre annexation piece of property. We have a lot of other things going on in the city on a daily basis, and this is to help relieve the workflow in that department.
Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you.
We have development proposals around our light rail stations. We've got the Federal Center. We've got some things going on that require another planner. Pardon me?
Rooney Valley.
Rooney Valley, right. Yeah, so another planner is absolutely warranted. Okay, any other questions? Did we answer all the public's questions?
I think so.
I think so.
Did we answer your questions? Yes.
Did we answer your questions?
Got a few thumbs up over there.
Okay, good. All right. With that, I'm ready for a motion. And then we can make our comments during the motion.
Okay. So I'm going to go that this is not the first one is not a.
Right, we'll do this one at a time.
Right. Is not a zoning. So I'm moving for the adoption of ordinance 2013-18 on second and final reading.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any comments from council?
And just for clarification, this is the annexation.
The annexation. I think it's appropriate to make comments at this point, right, Councilor? All right. So, Councilor Wilson.
I can't believe I'm the only light up so far. I just wanted to say some things. First of all, to the Taylors, thank you so much for considering bringing in your property to Lakewood. It's a beautiful property, and I, for one, would be very proud for it to be part of Lakewood. To the people in the audience, I just want to say everybody's been very politic about the Green Gables golf course. And as a counselor, I, for one, am not very pleased with how that property has been handled by the county. and it really should have been annexed into Lakewood, in my personal opinion, anyway. So one of the reasons to annex this property is to have it handled the way that Lakewood likes to handle it, which was with a lot of public input, with a look at what's surrounding it and what's appropriate to the neighborhood surrounding it. So one of the reasons why we're looking at this and why I'm going to be in support of it is beautiful property, a lot of great open space, and I think we should do whatever we can to support it being the way that it is. And if anything ever does happen to it in the future, and hopefully it won't for a very long time, if ever at all, it's very carefully considered, not only by your city government, but by the neighbors that are all around it, and and whatever's the best interest of the city. So, thanks.
Councillor Paul, then Councillor Barroway.
Well, that was very well said, and I also would echo that, and thank you to Mr. Taylor and Mr. Doring for your response, and Ms. Hodson. I know you worked really hard on this, so this is really cool. I think this is the first one that we've done as a body, and to have this piece be our first is really cool. So thank you to the neighbors, and we'll continue to be here to work with you. It sounds like it's just going to be same old business, same as usual. Thanks.
Thanks. Councillor Barroway.
Councillor Wilson and Paul both did a nice job of saying what I wanted to say, and I just want to reiterate a thanks to Mr. Taylor for allowing us the opportunity this evening to come out and take a tour of the property. A beautiful piece of property, and as Councillor Wilson said, it will be quite an opportunity for the city of Lakewood to have this in our city confines within the city of Lakewood. It's just a beautiful, beautiful piece of property. So, thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. I had the extraordinary opportunity to meet you this afternoon, and it was an honor and a pleasure. Also had the opportunity to see the beautiful Taylor property. In your home, you had pictures of your parents. They looked to be extraordinary human beings. I'm only sorry I never had a chance to meet them. I am a caretaker of my dad's property as well, and I understand on a personal level how difficult it is when you have emotional attachment to land to see changes. God bless you, and I'm so happy that we are here for you. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just close this before we vote by saying that this is really a significant milestone for the city of Lakewood. It is a privilege to be approached by Mr. Taylor and have us consider to bring this property into the city of Lakewood. Mr. Hoyt in his presentation used a couple of terms. One was, he used the term jewel. This property is indeed a jewel. It is unique. There is just nothing else like it. And to have that jewel be coming into the city of Lakewood is just, again, a milestone for us. The second thing that Mr. Hoyt said was he talked about a sense of shared values between the Taylor family and the city of Lakewood. And that really, really rings true to me, and I think to the rest of council here. And she hates it when I do this, but I have to credit our city manager for the relationship she formed with Mr. Taylor, and you know, with her background in community resources and understanding the value of conservation and those sorts of things. I think that was what really brought home that sense of shared values that this community has with the family, and that's one of the significant reasons why we're here tonight. So I thank you, Kathy, and sorry for embarrassing you. But this is a great day for the city of Lakewood. So with that, we have a motion and a second on the annexation. Please cast your votes. And it passes unanimously. On to the second, which is the zoning. The motion, please.
Mayor Murphy, I move the adoption of ordinance O 2013-19 on second and final reading based on the findings of fact of the Planning Commission dated August 7th, 2013.
All right, motion and second. Any comments, questions? If not, please cast your votes. Passes unanimously. And on the third motion, which is, well, I'm ready for the third motion.
Mayor Murphy, I move for the adoption of ordinance O 2013-20 on second and final reading.
One in which Councilors Roybal and King are taking special interest, the inclusion in Ward 3. Please cast your votes. Whoops, sorry, my fault. Please do it again. Hit the wrong switch up here. And again, passes unanimously. Congratulations, and I should say, really the congratulations, we couldn't be happier, so. All right, thank you all very much. All right, on to general business. Item 13, we do need to have a motion and a vote to hold a special meeting, the budget meeting that we've been talking about tonight. So with that, I would ask Councilor Barraway to read the motion into the record.
I move to have ordinance O 2013-21 on first reading be published in the didn't I do this already?
You did that one. Just read the item 13 here. Just read that.
Sorry. Here we go. Mayor Murphy, I move a motion to hold a special meeting at 7 p.m. on September 30th, 2013 for the specific purpose of holding a public hearing on the proposed 2013 revised 2014 budget and to set the hearing date on the campaign finance ordinance.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second to schedule the budget hearing on September 30th. With absent any discussion, please cast your vote. And that passes unanimously. Executive report, Ms. Hodson.
I do, thank you. I'm just delighted. I'm delighted about that, the new property in the city. So I have two announcements. Please join us for the first open house of the Comprehensive Plan and Sustainability Plan. It's next Wednesday night, September 18th, from 6:30 to 8:30 in the Cultural Center. We encourage everyone to attend, please, to listen to insightful speakers and participate in the planning for the future of Lakewood. So please mark that on your calendars. We'd like to have as many folks there as possible. And the other thing I'd like to mention is Belmar won another award. Can you believe it? They won another award. This one is called the Design Choice by buildabetterburb.com. And I heard about this from our Lakewood Sentinel reporter, Clark Reeder, and it's just another award for Belmar, really honoring them for the way that they built and transformed an old mall and built a beautiful new it's not really new anymore, but a beautiful community within our city. So congratulations to Belmar for winning yet another award. Thank you.
Great, and congratulations to them for the 10th annual successful Festival Italiano over the weekend. 100,000 people or more over there. Reports, I don't have anything. Councilor Councilor Wilson. Am I right?
Thursday we have Cops Community and Council, but I think I'll let Tom talk about it because he's done all the work.
Councilor Barraway?
Sure. Councilor Coop and I will have our start up our monthly ward meetings again. It will be this Wednesday morning at 7:30 at the 40 West Arts District, 1560 Teller Street. I'd love to have you stop by, 7:30 to 8:30. And Ward 1 and 2's Cops Council and Community is actually next Tuesday night, the 17th, starting at 6:30. And our topic of discussion, this will be held at the Clemens Center, is on homelessness in the city of Lakewood. And Councilor Coop is going to do the cooking that night. He volunteered.
All right, Councilor Roybal.
Thank you, Mayor. We're having a military veterans fair. It's called West Metro Veterans Fair, October 1st from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Lakewood Cultural Center. Please come join us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Coop. Councilor Paul.
Certainly. A little shout out to Clark. All right, that's fantastic. See, it pays off coming to all these meetings, right? I just wanted to mention, I'll leave our Cops Community Council to Councilor Quinn. However, we will be canceling our Saturday ward meeting because we'll be having our meeting on Thursday night, so please don't come. Saturday we'll be back. I think October 12th we'll be back, and we'll have a candidates forum, so join us then. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Killen and myself took a lead from our councilors in Ward 5 who had their last ward meeting dealing with West Nile. And on our next ward meeting, which is to be September 21st at 40 West Arch, that's a Saturday, at 9 o'clock in the morning, Dave Vocal, who is from the Jefferson County Health Department, will be coming. He is the zoonosis coordinator. Now, what does that mean? That means that he deals with diseases that are transported from animals to adults or to humans. So he's going to be talking to us about West Nile. Typically, this is the tail end of that season, but because it's been so warm, they are still seeing more cases, so we still need to do prevention. We have had 113 cases of West Nile in Colorado and 2 deaths, so this is serious stuff. But he will also be able to answer questions regarding rabies and the plague. So please join us. He is going to be extraordinary to answer our questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ramey. We should mention our good friend Ken Summers. Ken was a state representative serving part of Lakewood for a number of years. Recently, after concluding his political career, moved up to Fort Collins and unfortunately contracted encephalitis through West Nile. And Ken is in pretty serious condition and has a long and I think uncertain road to full recovery. So our thoughts and prayers are with Ken and his family. I know his opponent in his last election, Andy Kerr, has really been leading the fundraising effort for Ken and his family. So we congratulate Andy for that and wish Ken the best. Councilor King. Councilor Quinn.
Okay, yes, we are having our joint wards 4 and 5 COPS Community and Council event this coming Thursday, September 12th, over at the Lakewood Cultural Center Community Room. If you notice, we took the words a little out of order, so we weren't copying wards 1 and 2 exactly. Because I believe
copyrights.
We didn't want to have any copyright infringement. We are going to have food, actually pizza from Nicolo's in Ward 5. And Diana, the only reason I did all the work was I wanted to get my favorite pizza for the event. Because Councilor Barroway didn't offer to cook for us, so what could we do?
It was Councilor Coop.
Councilor Coop, I'm sorry. But anyway, thank you very much, and please join us if you're able to. We're going to have our sector liaison police officers there to answer questions and talk about a variety of hot topics right now in public safety and law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Wickman?
I can't recall. Did anybody mention the Carmody Master Plan coming up here? I don't remember the exact details, but it's coming up here in the next few days. Anybody remember?
That's going to be actually September 12th. Yes, this Thursday.
This Thursday. Okay. Just wanted to pass that on.
Thank you. Margie, anything on our general business? Tim?
No, thank you.
Kathy? All right, with that, we are adjourned at 8:52 p.m. Thank you.